Well, good morning, Blue Troopers. I hope everybody's doing well. I was looking at the kits up on the shelf, saw some of the old Monogram kits, and started thinking about how their kits had advanced over time, particularly where cockpits were concerned. I built a lot of Monogram kits as a kid, mostly 148 scale fighters. And I remember the Zero and the ME-109 had really basic cockpits. However, I built the P-51B, which seemed to have at least a floorboard and a control stick. But there were kits out there that, like the Avenger, that of course it had a larger sort of greenhouse cockpit, so it had a little bit more detail to it. But none of them were super detailed, but for the time they were fine. And then I got that P-51D, which I believe came out in 78, I think. And I realized that, wait a minute, Monogram had made the P-51B since the early 60s. And it had a floorboard and a control stick and a pilot figure and an instrument panel decal, so it had some detail. But as I recall, the Zero, you just glued the pilot, you had a little piece of plastic sticking out of an arm. You just glued him sideways against the fuselage of the airplane. I think it had an instrument panel and a headrest. That was it. But over time, they got more detailed till you get to the P-51D, which, again, you notice in the 1978 catalog, they didn't have a D model, but in the 79 they did. I think the mold was cut in 78. But all of a sudden now you've got a far more detailed cockpit, and one that kind of holds up a little bit today, although there were other complaints with the model, but still, I found it a fairly straightforward kit. And of course, Monogram was just having to keep up with the time, so to speak. But I just thought that was kind of interesting. You get, because when you buy these vintage kits, they're all part of the 148 series, but you can't really judge the early 60s or late 60s or mid 70s or even later 148 scale kits, because like so many models, the molds and everything advanced over time. But it's kind of interesting to juxtapose the early 60s kits against the 80s and 90s kits, or even the late 70s kits, and realize how much they were starting to try to stay up with the game, up their game, so to speak, for the competition. And of course, a lot of the Japanese companies were already putting in more detailed cockpits. And then they got into airplanes like the P-61 Black Widow and the Heinkel 111, where they were really, I remember building those kits as the Black Widow as a kid, and I was amazed how detailed the internal cockpit and radio and radar area and all that were. I was like, wow, that's a lot of detail for one stamping. And I would say between 68 and 78 was the big decade of, hey, we really got to make these things better. And they put a lot of effort towards that. Because if you get the Avenger or the Helldiver or the Zero or the Messerschmitt, which in the case of the Messerschmitt, I think you get just the pilot and a headrest, a backing. That's pretty. I think that's how the Zero did it also. But I was like, wow, somebody had a meeting and they said, yeah, this ain't, pardon the pun, this ain't gonna fly anymore. But I guess that was going on industry wide. But since I built so many Monogram kits, I was just more aware of it. Well, that was just my little thought for this morning. Time to finish my coffee and start getting to work. I want to work on the Tiger today and maybe get started on some other stuff. We'll see how the day goes. Only got a couple of days off, and I'm in the mood to build. So guys, you take care of yourselves. We'll see you later, and as always, model on.